Welcome back. The New York Times recently featured an article called "The Rise of Back to the Basics Funerals." Apparently, a growing number of people are considering green burials. Green burials avoid chemical preservatives and fancy caskets. They're cheaper and more environmentally friendly than conventional burials. What's interesting is that green burials aren't new. Islamic burials have been green for more than 1400 years. Now, Dr. Shabir Ali, I found these articles very interesting, and as I researched more, I realized that more and more people seem to be very interested in green burials, not necessarily doing them for themselves, but researching them, looking them up, and talking about them.
Yes, and you mentioned the fact that Islamic burials have been green from the inception.
Yes,
and
also Jewish burials as well, we should mention that.
Yes, and this was actually acknowledged both in the case of the Islamic and Jewish burials in the Religious News Service article that's available on the web. So in traditional Muslim understanding of burial, the way it was is that first of all there is an emphasis on doing it quickly. So no time for anything fancy. You just do the bare minimum, the quick disposal of the body in a respectful manner is what was emphasized.
Why is it important that it be quick?
Well, the reasoning for this is mentioned in the tradition, which says that if the body is, like if this person had been a good soul, then we should give him the chance to, or her the chance to meet his or her Lord very quickly, right? Because this world is thought to be, in a way, that which stands between us and our real meeting with God. And if this is a good soul, he or she wants to meet God quickly, so let's give them that chance. And if the person had been an evil person, well, it's good riddance. Let's do it quickly, get rid of this person. Unfortunately, it's not something to laugh about, but it's that was the rationale. But of course, the simplicity of this reflects on life as well, because part of the Islamic balance that is achieved here, as with most things, Islam achieves a sort of balance between extremes. Like one extreme is that you keep grieving for a long time, and another extreme is that you don't grieve at all. Well, the Islamic ethos says that you do grieve because you have lost a loved one, but at the same time, you don't grieve for beyond necessity. So often 3 days is said to be like the grieving period. After 3 days, it is expected that you will get up and running again, go back to your work and things like that. You're doing things in a normal way again. So a quick burial facilitates this. The funeral is over, and it's not dragging on for a long time, waiting for relatives to come from distant lands and so on. So this just prolongs the agony and the distress of the family while waiting for all of these procedures to be over and done with.
I notice in modern funerals they use embalming materials so that the body is preserved for a longer period of time. But it seems like in the Islamic tradition there's no need for that sort of thing, because the body is disposed of very quickly.
Yes, and of course in the Islamic understanding, the flesh and blood is not what is really important to the person, it's the soul, and that character that we have cultivated through our actions over time. That is what is ultimately important, because God, we believe, is going to give us new bodies at the resurrection. It's not going to be this old decomposing body. So all of the attention that is focused on the aesthetics of modern burials, to the extent that sometimes they use dentures to give the person like a nice facial expression. They might do things with eyebrows and things like this. They want to decorate this body to make this body look very good at the funeral. All of the expense that this entails, the cost of the casket, which is going to be buried there in the earth and so on. All of this, from the Islamic point of view, is contrary to the simplicity that we try to cultivate in most things in what we do. And the expense actually given to this funeral could, again in the Islamic thinking, be used as charity. And if this expense, rather than being spent on the funeral, is given away to feed the poor, for example, we believe that the credit for feeding the poor would then accumulate towards the dead person's soul. And so the dead person will benefit from our charitable works done on his or her behalf, rather than all of this elaborate and fancy burial, which goes nowhere but into the earth.
In the Islamic tradition, we don't take our possessions with us when we die. So the idea is that we're stripped away of all the worldly belongings, and ultimately we're all equal, except for our deeds when we go back to God.
True, true. And this is emphasized to the extent that when the person is buried, there are traditional burial cloths. And the way this is described in our literature is that they're very simple cloths. They're unstitched clothing, actually. So simple pieces of cotton, for example.
Everybody uses the same kind of material.
And everyone uses it. So the rich and the poor, the king and the pauper, all of them get buried in the simple clothing, unstitched, without any flair. So that reflects not only the fact that we are to go back to God only with our deeds, but it also saves money, which can be used for other good purposes. And now we are recognizing that this burial with its simplicity is the most environmentally friendly there is.
Tell me about the casket that is used for Muslims.
In traditional Muslim burials, the way this is described in books of Islamic jurisprudence, often a hole would be dug into the ground, and then onto one side a further niche would be dug out. And the idea is that the body is then lowered into the hole, and then slid over into that side niche. And then that niche may be enclosed with the body in it by putting some simple pieces of board or bamboo sticks or something like this. And then the grave itself will be filled with the earth. In Guyana, where I was growing up, they actually, because of the nature of the soil, they didn't have the niche over on the side, but they dug it deeper into the existing hole. So let's say the existing hole is about 3 feet wide. Well, then there will be like a 2 feet wide niche further dug into the ground, deeper still, so that the body would be placed in there, and then that niche would be covered with a flooring of simple boards, and then the dirt will go on top of that. So you were asking about the box?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the box where it is used is a very simple one. In many cultures, actually, in many Muslim societies, no box is used at all. The body is initially placed on a wooden plank of sorts, and that plank may have like legs attached to it, and bears would hold on to these legs as handles and carry the body to the grave. And then the body will be simply picked up by carriers manually and then placed into the niche as I earlier described, and the plank is kept for later use. So no box is needed in such a burial. In Canada, I have learned that the soil is of such a nature that you need a sort of box, or for whatever reasons, it has become very common in Canadian Muslim burials for the body to be placed in a simple box. Sometimes the box is coated with a cotton sheet, but this too is not necessary, and most burials are simpler in that they don't even have that cotton sheet. Simple box, plain wood, and the box is then placed with the body in it into the hole, and the hole is then covered with the dirt that came out initially from digging that hole.
So from your description then, it's clear that the emphasis is on the body degrading over time, and there not being any additional remnants left over. So for example, any extra metals within the hole or extra things. The idea is that the body should decompose.
Yes, of course, this is the environmental fallout from this, in that initially it may not have been thought in these environmental terms, but this is the result, because everything is so simple wood, simple clothing, and all of this would be expected to decompose over time. And as the Bible says, from dust you have come, to dust you return. The Quran says something similar, minha khalaqnakum wa fiha nu'idukum wa minha nukhrijukum taratan ukhra. It is from it we created you, to it we return you, and from it again we will resurrect you another time. Muslims actually often say these very words from the Quran at the time of burial as they are filling the hole with the soil.
Very quickly, there's been interest also in cremations. How environmentally friendly are those?
Cremations are thought to emit they burn fossil fuels, and their emissions are not good for the environment. So this is a drawback in cremations. The simple burial of the person seems to be more environmentally friendly. In some cultures, we know that the body was offered up on mountain tops. Maybe it was thought that this is an offering to the gods.
And the Tibetan sky burial, for example, or Zoroastrian ones as well.
And in that case, we might have the body being eaten by vultures or other animals. But this has not been the Islamic way. The Islamic way is to bury in the earth, and that is a simple procedure that's easy for people to accomplish, and it is quite environmentally friendly. And it is interesting that Islam turns out to be green in this way.
And I guess it also retains the dignity of the body as well.
Exactly, which is one of the governing principles in arranging the funeral, that everything is done in a dignified manner, the body is treated with great respect and care, and then eventually disposed of in this way.
All right, we'll leave it at that. We'll take a break. When we return, we will answer questions we receive from you, our viewers.